afternoon. Welcome to Spring Quarter ReadAloud. I'm Ruth Sesko, and I help arrange and schedule these, so if any of you are interested in reading something sometime, contact me through the library's web pages, and we'll see what we can get going and schedule for you. Our first Read Aloud this quarter is featuring Dr. Martinez with a book that he just recently published entitled Day of the Dead, which is set in 1913 during the Mexican Revolution, and it has a really interesting and intriguing plot, and I'll let him tell you more about it.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate the opportunity to share and also to be in the new library. It's such a wonderful opportunity, and thank you all for showing up today. It's always amazing to me that people would show up for reading ever. So it's always gratifying to see people come together and want to listen to what is in some ways a dying art form. I'll get off the pessimistic stuff in a minute. It is springtime, but thank you for showing up. And as Ruth was saying, I do want to read a little bit from Day of the Dead today. But I thought I'd start out with a couple of other things first. I started thinking about the purpose of Read Aloud, and I started thinking about my own genealogy in many ways, that what made me want to become a writer, and what I sought for in books as a young person, and what I really, how books really stepped into a breach when I was a young person, as most of you can relate to or think back on. Adolescence is tumultuous, and you've got all these problems, and you feel alienated. And so, of course, like many of you sitting in here, one of the first books that really meant something to me and reached out to me and made me feel that I wasn't alone was Catcher in the Rye. And so I remember when I was a kid, that reading that book the first time, that one of the things that struck me immediately about Holden Caulfield as a narrator was his comments about what reading meant to him. And I can remember I was a terrible student as a young person. I was kicked out of 3 high schools before I was able to graduate. I had a very troubled adolescence. But one of the constants in my life was reading and finding books that made me feel that somehow the confusion out there had some kind of answer. And if it didn't have an answer, at least other people were confused too. And so I was saddened to find out that Salinger had died a couple of months ago, as all of you are aware, I'm sure. And so I thought it was a little bit of a tribute to him, and also as a kind of a shared moment here, I would read the section that first really reached out to me as a teen. And in this section, Holden, it's very near the beginning of the book, has just gone and faced his teacher, Mr. Spencer, who essentially sort of gently berates him for his lack of enthusiasm and motivation. And he's kind of skulked back to his dorm room, and he starts thinking about a couple of things, and these reached out to me. So it was, here we go. It was pretty nice to get back to my room after I left old Spencer, because everybody was down at the game and the heat was on in our room for a change. It felt sort of cozy. I took off my coat and my tie and unbuttoned my shirt collar, and then I put on this hat that I bought in New York that morning. It was this red hunting hat with one of those very, very long peaks. I saw it in the window of this sports store when we got out of the subway, just after I noticed I'd lost all the goddamn foils. It only cost me $1. The way I wore it, I swung the old peak way around to the back. Very corny, I'll admit, but I liked it that way. It looked good that way. Then I got this book I was reading, and I sat down in my chair. There were 2 chairs in every room. I had one, and my roommate Ward Stradlater had one. The arms were in sad shape because everybody was always sitting on them, but they were pretty comfortable chairs. The book I was reading was this book I took out of the library by mistake. They gave me the wrong book, but I didn't notice it till I got back to my room. They gave me Out of Africa by Isaac Denison. I thought it was going to stink, but it didn't. It was a very good book. I'm quite illiterate, but I read a lot. My favorite author is my brother D.B., and my next favorite is Ring Lardner. My brother gave me a book by Ring Lardner for my birthday, just before I went to Penn State. It had these very funny, crazy plays in it, And then it had this one story about a traffic cop that falls in love with this very cute girl that's always speeding. Only he's married, the cop, so he can't marry her or anything. Then this girl gets killed because she's always speeding. That story just about killed me. What I like best is a book that is at least funny once in a while. I read a lot of classical books like The Return of the Native and all, and I like them. And I read a lot of war books and mysteries and all. But they don't knock me out too much. What really knocks me out is a book that, when you're all done reading it, you wish the author that wrote it was a terrific friend of yours. And you could call him up on the phone whenever you felt like it. That doesn't happen much, though. I wouldn't mind calling this Isaac Dennison up and read longer, except that DB told me he's dead. You take that book, Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. I read it last summer. It's a pretty good book and all, but I wouldn't want to call Somerset Maugham up. I don't know. It just isn't the kind of guy I'd want to call up. That's all, and I'd rather call old Thomas Hardy up. I like that Eustacia Body. Anyway, I put on my new hat and sat down and started reading the book Out of Africa. I'd read it already, but I wanted to read certain parts over again. I'd only read about 3 pages, though, when I heard somebody coming through the shower curtains. Even without looking up, I knew right away who it was. It was Robert Ackley, this guy that roomed right next to me. And I can remember reading that book, reading that section, and I mean, of course I was enthralled with this book, but there was so much of this affection for books that Holden had that reached out to me and made sense to me in this kind of way, that even this kid who came from such a very different circumstance than I did, you know, he's this Manhattanite, fairly sophisticated parents, from fairly rarefied environment, money, and very intelligent. And here I was, this poor Mexican-American kid growing up in South Texas with grandparents who had been migrant workers who were functionally literate for the most part. But there was something that reached out at that moment, and I thought, well, look, here's this character, here's this young person like me. And I started to see the power of fiction. And so when I wrote my autobiographical novel, my second novel called Drift, I decided that I would also talk a little bit about my literacy and the role of my grandmother in my growing literacy. As I said before, I was a very poor student, but the one thing that I remember is that my grandmother, who couldn't write or read very well at all, I mean, I can still remember phone calls that she'd make to me when I was 12, 13 years old. She'd call me up in the middle of the day, or even sometimes at night, to say, how do you spell 13? And, you know, or sometimes she'd be writing out a check or something, and so she'd have to call me up to spell it. But the one thing that she did was to impress upon me how important it was for me to be educated, and for how important it was for me to read as much as I could. So my earliest memories with my grandmother is her walking me from her small one-bedroom shack in the west side of San Antonio Barrio to the local public library. It was a very small public library in Las Palmas, there in the west side of San Antonio, and getting me my first library card when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And how exciting it was to go to her house on Saturdays, because I knew that we would walk to the library. It was only about a mile away. She'd take me by the hand and we'd go in there, and she would spend 2 or 3 hours there just sort of perusing the books, even though they weren't a particular interest or relevance to her, because she wasn't a very good reader. But knowing that I was there to either hear stories read to me or peruse the books as long as I wanted, and check out as many books as I could and take them home. And I don't know about you guys, but if you remember when you're in elementary school, you have these little book fairs that come through maybe a couple of times a year. They give you the little sheet. It's made out of cheap paper, and it's got all the little books that you can buy as a kid, you know, and the prices of them are very modest. I remember some of them being 75 cents, for instance. And every time that happened, I'd call my grandmother and say, hey, you know, the book fair's coming. Well, you've got $5. And so I'd go back and I'd spend the weekend agonizing over how to maximize the books for those $5. You know, how many books could I find? How many could I put together? And then, you know, filling out your form and taking it to your teacher, and then the wait until those books came in. It was always 2 or 3 weeks before they came in. And every day you'd go in hoping that you saw the little box under her desk, you know, and did the books come today? And you didn't want to really ask because she was short-tempered about it, but, you know, you knew that one of these days those books were going to come in, they were going to pass them out. Of course, the day that they did come out, you'd see them there under the desk, and you'd have to wait until the end of the school day to get them. So it was even more agonizing, like, oh, my books are there, and I could smell them, you know. But, so I thought I'd read a little bit about some of the sort of autobiographical elements here that occur in Drift. And this is a novel about a young man named Robert Lomos, who is 16 years old and whose parents have had a very terrible splitting up, leaving his mother emotionally distraught, and actually undergoes a nervous breakdown and decides to leave Robert behind in San Antonio in the care of his grandmother, and she runs off to Los Angeles to try and heal up. And of course he feels very abandoned, so this novel is in essence his attempt to get together enough money to run away from San Antonio and run off to Los Angeles and find his mother and convince her that he won't be much of a problem to her. In fact, he can be of help to her. And so that's just kind of a background on here. But this is Robert recounting his first days in high school. The night before my first day in high school, there was a church rally for the back to schoolers. My cousins Enrique and Juan were there too. My uncle Agustin, Enrique's pops, put down a mean sermon. He told us all about the shit we'd face and that we were on a mission. He didn't pray that night. He threatened God. I know you, Lord. I know that these young men and women will not put out prayers that will not be answered. They are yours and you are their father. They are alone in a world of iniquity, a world of sin, a world of terrible violence and danger. Look on them now, Lord, and protect them, their minds, their bodies, their spirits, from the attacks they will face beginning tomorrow. It didn't exactly make my heart race with anticipation. It sounded more like some hellish battle where a square kid like me was sure to get stomped. But my uncle wasn't even half close. Crockett High was more fucked up than the school Michelle Pfeiffer tries to straighten out in Dangerous Minds. On the first day, I walked through the front door to stare up at this big white statue of a Mustang on its hind legs, as if to say, don't even try it here. We don't fuck around. The thing must have been 20 feet high, impressive, until I noticed that he had no sack. He was all attitude. You got to have equipment if you're going to front like that. The school was the same way. Lots of talk about this and that, but no action. Most of the people were worrying about getting out of the motherfucker without getting stabbed. Early on, I had the stupid notion that I wanted to be a musician like my pop. It's pathetic now, but I wanted to try and impress the old man, show him we had something in common, something that connected us, you know, father and son. So I tried band at Crockett, but within a week it was obvious that I had zero talent. But at least I could tell what sounded right and what sounded wrong. I couldn't stand to be in that practice room with the people who played even shittier than me. Most of those fools didn't even know which end of the horn to blow into. The music rolling around that hall made the band teacher clench from his ass to his scalp. Kids would pretend they were blowing notes when they weren't doing shit. Some of them didn't even have reeds in their mouthpieces. Others just played nonsensical notes, doing their own thing. The drummers were so off, you might have thought they were playing a completely different piece of music. Half the time they were. Band dude, he would stop us in the middle of the piece and take a stroll, his face red with fury and disgust, to the back of the room and take a glance at the music stands.